What's up, Rich? What you got going on today, brother? Yes, I'm spending my day off watching hearings about the next Supreme Court justice. I live an exciting life. Hey, come out, PLA. What's up, brother? This is just an impromptu live, just messing around. They're having hearings all week for the next Supreme Court justice, so I figured I'd stream some of it just to listen to these idiots sit here and grandstand. So she's going to be the one to take Stephen Byers' place. Can you guys hear the audio on this? Cat, you're killing me. Hey, Fudd, what's happening, brother? Nah, so far, no good yelling yet. Everybody's still in the ass-kissing stage of this. Oh, man, why can I not hear the freaking hearings? It's supposed to be playing audio on this shit. Get out, cat. Let me see if I can play with this again and see if I can get the audio playing, because it's supposed to be sharing the audio. I might have to pull this up a little different.
She likes that one. And, but we've talked today a little bit about the momentous occasion that this is and bringing you forward. And
but can you guys hear the audio now?
Because unlike any other federal office, this is a lifetime appointment. And the decisions that you're going to make are going to impact rights and freedoms of every single American citizen. And, you know, President Biden thinks you're the right person for the job, but it doesn't end there. We do have that role of advice
now
and
we
consent.
Can hear it, just can't see it.
And it is up to us to carry that job out. So, as
like
you have heard repeatedly, this is going to be a fair and very thorough and very respectful hearing, and we're going to work through this process with some
she's not really going to
change
the composition
of the manner, at all, the respect that you
she's taking
deserve.
Stephen Byers' place.
And we've talked some today about the
but she's a young woman and she's going to be on the court for a very long time. And she is going to be completely anti-gun, anti-freedom, and pro-government. So, yeah, it's not going to be a fun time.
That made her suitable for the court. And I know your faith is important to you. We've also talked some about Janice Rogers Brown and the treatment that she endured here. So we are going to be pleased to move forward and focus on the issues that the American people want to focus on, because they want to know about you and how you're going to approach your job and the decisions that you have made in the past, what you've written, what you have said. And I've got a few areas that I'm going to want to delve a little bit further with you. And we touched on some of these as we talked. Right now, when I talk to Tennesseans, one of the most important things that they bring up is the issue of parental rights and wanting to be able to rear their children as they see fit. And moms and dads are very concerned about this progressive agenda that is being pushed in some of our public schools. Educators are allowing biological males to steal opportunities from female athletes in the name of progressivism. Just last week, an entire generation of young girls watched as those charged with protecting them allowed a biological male to compete and beat a biological woman at the highest level of collegiate sports. Some girls have been forced to share locker rooms with biological males. Rather than defending our girls, those in power are teaching them that their voices don't matter. They're being treated like second-class citizens. And Americans need a Supreme Court justice who will protect our children and will defend parents' constitutional right to decide what is best for their own kids. And here we need a little clarity. At a time when these parental rights appear to be under assault by the radical left, your public comments about, and I'm going to quote you, the transformative power of progressive education, end quote. These are deeply concerning. You serve on the board of a school that teaches kindergartners, 5-year-old children, that they can choose their gender and teaches them about so-called white privilege. This school has hosted an organization called Woke Kindergarten and pushes an anti-racist education program for white families. Your public endorsement of this type progressive indoctrination of our children causes one great concern when it comes to how you may rule on cases involving parental rights. Parents also know that it's only a matter of time before we have the next pandemic, and they're concerned about more mask mandates or lockdowns from unelected bureaucrats that would harm their children's mental health and stunt their development. The American people want a Supreme Court justice who will protect their families' freedoms, not allow government overreach into private family decisions. Now, moms that I'm speaking with raise the issue of crime, and you've consistently called for greater freedom for hardened criminals. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, you advocated, and again I quote, for each and every criminal defendant in the DC, for each and every criminal defendant in the DC should be Department of Corrections custody should be released. That would have been 1,500 criminals back on the street if you had had your way. And you use the COVID-19 pandemic as justification.
No, that's all right,
a
Jeff. That
fentanyl
stream
drug
went for
dealer, a
fucking
bank
ever
robber
last
addicted
night.
to heroin, and a
Trying to go
convict
through
who
that
murdered a
hearing,
U.S. Marshal into
that
our
markup.
communities. But your efforts to protect
Let me see if I can
convicts
switch this
began
around a
long
little bit and get
before
us some
the
better
pandemic.
video.
You used your time and talent.
All right, can you guys still hear this chick? Yeah, everything was twitching after last night. Ah, come on, this thing's killing me. I'm just going to have to do the entire screen share.
Constitution and the rule of law.
Can you guys hear this chick again?
Not a judicial activist who will attempt to make policy from the bench. Without a judicial philosophy, a judge is legally adrift and will be inclined to consider policy.
So I don't know whether you
rather
heard
than
the
law.
part. She's got a
You
habit of
once wrote that
sentencing
every
child
judge has,
molesters
and I
to
quote,
a lot
personal
lower
hidden
sentences
agendas,
than
end
would be
quote,
recommended.
then
That makes
influence
me
how
feel
they
nice
decide
about this
cases.
judge.
So I can only wonder,
Man,
what's your hidden agenda? Is it to let violent criminals, cop killers, and child predators back to the streets? Is it to restrict parental rights and expand government's reach into our schools and our private family decisions?
Yep.
Is it to support the radical left's attempt to pack the Supreme Court? You have praised the 1619 Project, which argues the U.S. is a fundamentally racist country, and you have made clear that you believe judges must consider critical race theory when deciding how to sentence criminal defendants.
Apparently,
Is it
she's
your
not a real
personal
big
hidden
fan of
agenda
putting
to
child
incorporate
predators and
critical
murderers in
race
prison.
theory into our
I'm getting a
legal
lot of
system?
warm and fuzzies from this chick
These
so far.
are answers that the American people need to know. So we are going to look at past statements and decisions and seek clarification from this committee before we make our decisions. So let me close again by congratulating you on your impressive career and your nomination to the nation's highest court. Regardless of the outcome of the confirmation process, you and your family should be
damned if it
incredibly
is, a
proud
lot
of
of these
all that
people are
you
going
have
to turn around and
achieved.
vote for this.
Your story
fucking
is a
asshat.
wonderful example of the American dream fulfilled.
And to top it off, I don't know
You
whether
are
you
able
guys
to
have
sit
heard. I
here
saw a
today
blip
because
on
you
it
were reared
just a
and
minute
built your
ago.
career
But
in a
apparently,
free
Clarence
country
Thomas is in the hospital
whose
with an
laws
infection.
protect equal justice and opportunity
Again,
for
something
all,
not giving me the
to
warm and
ensure that
fuzzies.
future generations can expect the
Because
same
Clarence
blessings
Thomas is
and
probably the best
opportunities
justice
you
we have
receive.
on the Supreme
We
Court.
need justices who will be dedicated to justice and the rule of law. Our questions to you over the coming days are going to be tough, but they're tough by necessity because it is our duty to determine whether you will, first and foremost, uphold the Constitution and our nation's founding principles.
That's going to be
Thank
the
you
big
so
thing. Are
much
these
for
people
joining
going to
us.
run from
Thank
being
you, Senator
called
Blackburn.
racist
All
when
committee
they
members
actually
have now
ask this
completed
chick
their opening
pointed questions?
statements. At this point in time, we're going to have a little shuffle of logistics.
This
I'll
is
ask
just-
that the two
This is the
introducers
second
please
part of
come
the
forward to
hearings
the
for the
witness
day. This
table.
is live.
Judge Jackson, you can take a brief rest from the glare of the spotlight.
They already had one
We're fortunate
part of the
today to
hearing
have
this
two
morning,
distinguished
so
guests
I haven't
introducing
gone
Judge
back and watched
Jackson.
that yet.
We will hear from Judge Thomas Griffith, who served as a
Oh,
judge
good
on the
deal.
U.S.
Yeah, if
Circuit
Clarence
Court
Thomas
of
is
Appeals for
recovering
the
well,
District
yeah,
of
that
DC
makes me
Circuit
feel better because
from
I hadn't looked
2005
at
to 2020.
anything to see how
And
bad
Professor
it
Lisa
actually
Fairfax,
was.
who serves as a presidential professor and co-director of the Institute for Law and Economics at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School. Judge Griffith, we will start with you.
Let me see.
Make sure your microphone is turned on. There's a red button.
How's that?
Been a while since you've been here. So please.
Okay. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I come here today as a retired federal appeals court judge with 15 years of experience on the United States Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit. I come here as a jurist appointed by Republican President George W. Bush. And I come here as someone who understands that there are few greater responsibilities under the Constitution than serving as a justice on the United States Supreme Court. It takes a jurist of high character, keen intellect, deep legal knowledge, and broad experience to ensure that the judiciary plays its unique role under the Constitution to uphold the rule of law impartially and not to be, in the words of Justice Stephen Breyer, partisans in robes. Today, I have the high honor to introduce Judge Katanji Brown Jackson, a jurist who has all of those qualities. When President Biden introduced her to the nation a little over 3 weeks ago, the American people caught their first glimpse.
This is kind of a shitty way to split the screen, but I actually want to be able to see who's talking.
She began her remarks with an expression of her faith in God and her gratitude for this nation, which she rightly observed is the greatest beacon of hope and democracy the world has ever known. I first met Judge Jackson in 2013 after the Senate had confirmed
Yeah,
her
and that's
nomination
going to be it,
to
man.
the
You
federal
know they're going to
district
push
court
this
as a
crap.
trial judge. 8 years
Well,
later,
why don't you want to
she
support
joined the
her?
D.C.
She's
Circuit
a
as
black
an appellate
woman.
judge after
Are you
another Senate
racist?
confirmation. I've had many opportunities to review her work and observe her work
And
over
these
the years as
retarded
judge.
ass Republicans
And on
will
several
fall for this
occasions,
shit.
I
Lindsey
reviewed her
Graham will probably
decisions
be
on
on here
appeal.
talking about how he
Although we
supported
did not always
Justice
agree
Sotomayor
on the
or other
outcome the
ones,
law required,
which he did.
I respected her diligent and careful approach, her
Like
deep
that would be something
understanding,
to be
and
proud
her
of.
collegial manner, indispensable traits for success as a justice on the Supreme Court. About her collegial manner, that important feature of the justice's work is often overlooked. Although appointed by different
Well,
presidents,
yeah, you're right,
the
man.
justices have
It
genuine
absolutely is
fondness
more racist
and
to
respect
support her
for one
just
another.
because she
We
is
saw
black.
some of that in their expressions of admiration
that's-
and love for Justice Breyer when he announced his retirement.
The only thing that should matter
civil
going on the
manner
Supreme Court is
in
if
which
you can
the
read the
justices
Constitution and apply
debate
it as
the
written.
large and vexing
That's
issues
what should
before
matter.
them is vital not
But
only to the success
we
of the
don't
Supreme Court,
have that when
but
it
to the
comes to
success of our
Supreme Court
nation.
justices,
The
especially
Constitution
those
requires that of
on the
all
left.
of us.
Now,
It goes without
not like
saying that
so-called
civility of
Republicans
debate
have
and
done a
respect
real
for
good
the
job of
differing views of
appointing
others
people to the
are
Supreme
sorely
Court either.
lacking from our public life. Judge Jackson's life has modeled these qualities. Perhaps most important, Judge Jackson is an independent jurist who
Hey, Snacks,
adjudicates
little coffee.
based on the facts and the law and not as a partisan. Time and again, she has demonstrated that impartiality on the bench, sometimes ruling in favor of the government, sometimes ruling against the government, sometimes ruling in favor of the individual, sometimes ruling in favor of the corporation. Her rule is simple: follow the law. Now, some think it noteworthy that a former judge appointed by a Republican president would enthusiastically endorse a nomination to the Supreme Court by a Democratic president. That reaction is a measure of the dangerous hyperpartisanship that is seeped into every nook and cranny of our nation's life, and against which the framers of the Constitution warned us. There should be nothing unusual about my support for a highly qualified nominee who has demonstrated through her life's work her commitment to the rule of law and an impartial judiciary. My former colleagues in the federal judiciary, Michael Ludig, Michael Chertoff, David Levy, and Andrew Guilford, each appointed by Republican presidents, and all highly respected judicial conservatives, have also voiced their strong support for Judge Jackson's confirmation. There was a time not so long ago when bipartisan support of the president's nomination of a highly qualified jurist was regular order. Antonin Scalia was confirmed by the Senate 98-0. Ruth Bader Ginsburg by a vote of 96-3. The rule of law is a fragile possibility in the best of times. Today, it is literally under attack in Ukraine and is threatened around the world and in our own country by autocrats and their sympathizers who give lip service to the rule of law, but then work to undermine it at every turn. As Justice Scalia taught us so well for so long, an indispensable feature of the republic the Constitution created is an independent judiciary of judges who have taken an
the Supreme
oath
Court has
not to a president
for
or a
decades
party,
now been
but
nothing
to the
but a
American people
freaking
and to
tool,
God, that
especially
they
of
will
the
be
left.
impartial. Judge Katanji Jackson Brown has demonstrated her unwavering commitment to that oath. I applaud this exceptional nomination, which I encourage the Senate to confirm.
I like how this
Thank
dude,
you.
she
you,
gets
Judge.
called out for
Professor
not
Lisa
sentencing
Fairfax.
child molesters and murderers.
Chairman Durbin,
and then this guy's talking
Ranking
about how
Member
good of a
Grassley,
jurist
and
she
members
is.
of the Senate Judiciary. My name is Lisa Fairfax. I am a presidential professor of law at the University of Pennsylvania School of Law and co-director of its Institute for Law and Economics. Prior to my academic career, I worked at corporate and securities
We'll
law
see.
at a
I
large
might
law
fix something in
firm.
a minute.
But before that, I was roommate and a very dear friend at Harvard College and Harvard
All
Law
right, give me a
School
minute. I'll
of
fix you some
Judge
toast.
Katanji Brown Jackson. who I am so very honored to introduce
Huh?
to you today and to the American people.
And jelly on it?
Katanji and I met during our first days of college nearly 35 years ago. Those first moments when you wonder if you belong.
Oh, chickens are doing chicken
She's the
things in the
friend
yard.
that made sure
Look,
we all did.
yeah.
A woman of deep faith in
on a live
God
stream
and
right now
unyielding
watching,
love for family.
Supreme Court
Katanji
Justice
defines
hearings.
friendship. She's the friend you're immediately drawn to for their outgoing and friendly nature. As our circle of friends grew, she's the one who became the rock for us all. Even though we are the same age, she is the role model who makes you believe in what she said. You can do it, and here's how. And she showed us how.
Now this is a
By
chick that the
power of her
Biden
example of
administration
hard work,
picked simply
preparation, and
because
excellence that
she is a
transforms
black
the
female.
seemingly impossible into the achievable.
Again, not
Together, we poured our souls into our studies,
getting the warm and fuzzies about
graduating
this chick's
college with
judicial
honors,
record.
and then doing it all over again when we enrolled and graduated law school with
Consider,
honors.
I don't think she actually
became
has a
sisters
whole
and saw
lot
each
of
other's families as our own.
written opinions
We
out
both
there
met
at
our
this point.
husbands when we were students, and we were there for each other as we walked down the aisles, started our legal careers, and eventually our lives as working mothers. My husband, Roger Fairfax, now Dean of American University's Washington College of Law, has described Katanji's impeccable credentials that's distinguished her at every level of her professional career. He also knows her as one of our children's most favorite people in the world. Our college roommate, Nina Simmons, a top corporate lawyer, has described Katanji's unwavering work ethic. She puts her head down and gets it done, even and perhaps especially when no one is watching. Our other college roommate, Antoinette Coakley, a distinguished business law
Wonder what
professor,
else she's
has
gonna do when
described
no one else is
Katanji as a
watching.
coalition builder. We knew early on that she could be anything she chose to be, but also that she seemed destined to be a judge because of her ability to see all sides and render fair and level-headed decisions. But our tight-knit group of girlfriends also knows that there's so much more to Katanji beyond her brilliant mind. There's her wonderful sense of humor, her gift of storytelling, her heart of gold that always shows up. From the first call you make for advice about your career to the first knock you hear on the door after learning you're diagnosed with cancer. You never have to ask. She is always there. Above all,
Yeah,
Katanji
that's,
is humble enough not to pretend she knows how to have it all.
Because
But she
there
does
aren't a whole
know
lot of
how to
people
give
that are
it her
going to
all.
be paying attention to a
At what
lot
she
of this
gives
stuff.
to her
Yeah, I'm
family,
pretty sure she's
her friends, she also gives to the law
gonna be
and
making
to this
some
country.
decisions we aren't
A
necessarily
testament
going
of
to
her
approve
character
of.
is all the people of different backgrounds and beliefs who understand that essence of Katanji.
I still
We've
don't
seen that in
see.
her endorsements
You know,
from
there's
bipartisan colleagues from the bench
they
and the
won't let
bar,
cameras
and from
in the
both civil
Supreme
rights
Court.
leaders
We
and
can
members
listen to
of
the
law
oral
enforcement.
arguments, but we can't have
And we will
cameras
see
there.
it in the history she will make. I know she is honored and humbled by
I
the
would really
significance
like
of
to
this
see
moment.
videos sometimes of
Not
these
for what it
people
means for
making their
her,
decisions.
but what it means for our
It
amazing
would go
country.
a long way to informing the public.
Confirmation of the idea that America is a place in which all of us can feel a sense of belonging, and all of us can reach our fullest potential. While challenging, I would summarize nearly 35 years of friendship in this way. By highlighting Katanji's faith in God and country, her intellectual brilliance, her goodness and grace, and a work ethic that makes her perfectly suited for the serious task of serving on the Supreme Court. It is with tremendous pride, love, and gratitude for her willingness to serve that I introduce to you my dear friend and an exemplar of the best of America's promise, Judge Katanji
Her
Brown
willingness
Jackson.
to serve.
Thank you.
I mean, how would
Thank
you
you
like
both.
to get a
Professor
lifetime
Fairfax
appointed
and Judge
job
Griffith,
with a
I'm
very
sure
good
that,
salary?
Judge Jackson and her family deeply appreciate your being here today and your kind words. I want to add to the list of
takes a
introducers,
whole lot of
man sitting behind you, Senator Doug
sacrifice.
Jones, who has introduced
And I
Judge
am
Jackson
so glad
to
I
many of
voted
us,
against that
not,
bastard,
for the
and he
first
is
time,
no longer a
maybe
senator from
reintroduced it.
Alabama.
But Doug, thank you for serving in this cause and for helping the president and Judge Jackson. Thank you all three for being with us today. We are now going to move to the next phase of the program, and that is to hear from Judge Jackson.
Good old Dickie
So if we
Durbin.
can set up the table. Before you sit down, Judge, I'm going to ask you to take the oath, so.
And this is the
Please
full
raise your
Senate
right hand. Be affirmed that
judiciary
the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
committee that
truth, so help
she's
you
in
God.
front of course.
I do.
Let the record reflect that the judge has answered in the affirmative, and having met that requirement. you
It'd have
may
been
now
funny if she
proceed with
missed the damn
readings.
chair. I'm sorry. It would have been absolutely hysterical. And you know she's not going to get treated like Clarence
Chairman
Thomas in his
Durbin,
confirmation hearing.
Ranking Member Grassley, and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you for convening this hearing and for considering my nomination as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. I am humbled and honored to be here. And I am also truly grateful for the generous introductions that my former judicial colleague, Judge Tom Griffith, and my close friend, Professor Lisa Fairfax, have so graciously provided. I'm also very thankful for the confidence that President Biden has placed in me and for the kindness
That's a
that
term
he
that
and the
still
First
makes me
Lady
sick
and
to
the
my
Vice
stomach.
President
President
and the
Biden.
Second Gentleman have extended to me and my family. Today will be the fourth time that I've had the honor of appearing before this committee to be considered for confirmation. Over the past 3 weeks, I have also had the honor of meeting each member
I
of this
just noticed
committee
it. I like how they got
separately.
the chat disabled
And I've
over
met
here on
with
the other
45
screen.
senators in
They
total.
know good and damn well they don't
Your
want to listen to what
careful
people are saying
attention
about
to
this
my
chick.
nomination demonstrates your dedication to the crucial role that the Senate plays in this constitutional process, and I thank you. And while I'm on the subject of gratitude, I must also pause to reaffirm my thanks to God, for it is faith that sustains me at this moment. Even prior to today, I can honestly say that my life has been blessed beyond measure. The first of my many blessings is the fact that I was born in this great nation a little over 50 years ago in September of 1970. Congress had enacted 2 civil rights acts in the decade before, and like so many who had experienced lawful racial segregation firsthand, my parents, Johnny and Ellery Brown, left their hometown of Miami, Florida, and moved to Washington, D.C. to experience new freedom. When I was born here in Washington, my parents were public school teachers, and to express both pride in their heritage and hope for the
Again,
future,
not getting a whole lot
they
of warm
gave
and
me
fuzzies as
an
this chick has
African
spent
name,
her entire life
Katanji
in Washington,
Onyeka,
D.C.
which they were told means lovely one. My parents taught me that unlike the many barriers that they had had to face growing up, my path was clearer, so that if I worked hard and I believed in myself in America, I could do anything or be anything I wanted to be. Like so many families in this country, they worked long hours and sacrificed to provide their children every opportunity to reach their God-given potential. My parents have been married for almost 54 years, and they're here with me today. I cannot possibly thank them enough for everything they've done for me. I love you, Mom and Dad. My father, in particular, bears responsibility for my interest in the law. When I was 4, we moved back to Miami so that he could be a full-time law student, and we lived on the campus of the University of Miami Law School. During those years, my mother pulled double duty, working as the sole breadwinner of our family while also guiding and inspiring 4-year-old me. My very earliest memories are of watching my father study. He had his stack of law books on the kitchen table while I sat across from him with my stack of coloring books. My parents also instilled in me and my younger brother, Katanji, the importance of public service. After graduating from Howard University, Katanji started out as a police officer, following 2 of our uncles. After the September 11th attacks on our country, Katanji volunteered for the Army and eventually became an infantry officer serving 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. Katanji is here today providing his love and support as always. And speaking of unconditional love, I would like to introduce you to my husband of 25 years, Dr. Patrick Jackson. I have no doubt that without him by my side from the very beginning of this incredible professional journey, none of this would have been possible. We met in college more than 3 decades ago, and since then, he's been the best husband, father, and friend I could ever imagine. Patrick, I love you. William, Patrick's identical twin brother, is here as well, along with his wonderful wife, Dana. Also here from Park City, Utah, are Patrick's older brother, Gardy, and his wife, Natalie. And last, but certainly not least, my very dear in-laws, the matriarch and patriarch of the Jackson family, Pamela and Gardner Jackson, have traveled here from Boston to be with me today. I'm saving a special moment in this introduction for my daughters, Talia and Layla. Girls, I know it has not been easy as I've tried to navigate the challenges of juggling my career and motherhood. And I fully admit that I did not always get the balance right.
So I just
But I
replied
hope
to
that
someone on a
you've seen
freaking
that with
comment.
hard work, determination, and love, it can be done. I am so looking forward to seeing what each of you chooses to do with your amazing lives in this incredible country. I love you so much. There are so many others who are not here today, but whom I need to acknowledge. I have a large extended family on both sides.
I just want to see
They are
someone
watching
really
from
start digging
Florida,
into her
North
judicial
Carolina,
record.
New Jersey,
Screw all the
Connecticut,
niceties. Let's
New
drill
York,
down to who this chick
Massachusetts,
actually
Colorado,
is
and
what
beyond.
her
I also
decisions
have
have
incredible
actually
friends.
been.
3 of my college roommates came here today
We'll
to
see
support
whether
me,
anybody
and I have so many other
puts down
boosters
the
from Miami Palmetto Senior High
flag of
School,
nicety
Harvard
and actually
undergrad, Harvard
does
Law
their
School, and
job
all
and
throughout my
questions
personal and
this chick.
professional life. I've also had extraordinary mentors, like my high school debate coach,
Let's see if
Fran
any of the
Berger.
assholes
May
in
she
here that
rest in
went off
peace.
on Amy Coney Barrett.
She
Let's see whether
invested
they actually
fully
asked
in
this
me,
chick some hard
including
questions.
taking me to Harvard, the first I'd ever really thought of it, to enter a speech competition. Mrs. Berger believed in me.
Of course, I'd have to look at
and
it,
in
but I think
turn,
some of these idiots
I
were around when
believed
they
in myself.
actually made a mockery
In
of
the
these
category of great
hearings
mentors, it
when
was
it
also
came to
my
Justice
great
Thomas.
good fortune to have had the chance to clerk for
What
3
did Thomas call it?
brilliant jurists,
A
U.S. District
high-tech
Judge
lynching.
Patty Saris, U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Bruce Selya, and Supreme Court
They
Justice
accused
Stephen
him of
Breyer.
everything under the damn
These
sun,
extraordinary
trying to stop
people
him from being
were
on the court because he
exceptional
was a
role models.
conservative black person.
Justice Breyer, in particular, not only gave me the greatest job that any young lawyer could ever hope to have,
Oh, I forgot.
but he
She
also
actually clerked for
exemplifies
Stephen
what it
Breyer.
means to be a Supreme Court justice of the highest level of skill and integrity, civility, and grace. It is extremely humbling to be considered for Justice
Now
Breyer's
that
seat,
tells you everything
and
that
I know
you need to
that I
know
could
about her.
never
She's
fill his
praising
shoes.
Stephen Breyer, who is an
But if
absolute
confirmed,
statist
I would
and
hope
believes in the full
to
power of the
carry
government
on
over
his
the
spirit.
individual.
On the day of his Supreme Court nomination,
Boy, those warm and
Justice
fuzzies.
Breyer said, quote, "What is law supposed to do, seen as a whole? It is supposed to allow all people, to live together in a society where they have so many different views, so many different needs, to live together in a way that is more harmonious, that is better, so that they can work productively together." End quote. I could not have said it better myself. Members of this
So
committee,
yeah, she's absolutely
I am
a
confirmed,
statist
I
and
commit
believes the
to you
government
that
should
I
control
will
every
work
part of
productively
civil
to
life.
support and defend the Constitution and this grand experiment of American democracy that has endured over these past 246 years. I have been a judge for nearly a decade now, and I take that responsibility and my duty to be independent very seriously. I decide cases from a neutral posture. I evaluate the facts, and I interpret and apply the law to the facts of the case before me without fear or favor, consistent with my judicial oath.
No,
I know
because if
that
you
my
actually
role as a
honored your
judge is a limited one,
judicial oath, you
that
would
the
respect the
Constitution
Constitution.
empowers me only to decide cases and controversies that are properly presented. And I know that my judicial role is further constrained by careful adherence to precedent. Now, in preparing for these hearings, you may have read some of my more than 570 written decisions, and you may have also noticed that my opinions tend to be on the long side. That is because I also believe in transparency, that people should know precisely what I think and the basis for my decision. And all of my professional experiences, including my work as a public defender and as a trial judge, have instilled in me the importance of having each litigant know that the judge in their case has heard them,
will actually
whether
uphold
or
the
not
constitutional
their
rights of
arguments
Americans when it comes to
prevail in
firearms.
court. During this
Especially
hearing,
being in the vein
I
of
hope that you will
Justice
see
Buyer.
how much I love our country
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
Constitution and the rights that make us free.
She will absolutely
I
uphold any
stand on
gun
the
law, no
shoulders
matter how
of
insane
so
that gun
many
law
who
is.
have come before me, including Judge Constance Baker Motley, who was the first African-American woman to be appointed to the federal bench and with whom I share a birthday. And like Judge Motley, I have dedicated my career to ensuring that the words engraved on the front of the Supreme Court building, "Equal justice under law," are a reality and not just an ideal.
Unless you're a gun owner, then you can get
Thank
fucked.
you for this historic chance to join the highest court, to work with brilliant colleagues, to inspire future generations, and to ensure liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Judge Jackson. Well, this is the end of the first day of the first 3 days, which are involving more personal, on a personal level, the senators on the Judiciary Committee. In a way, it's the easiest day because 10 minutes is merely a throat-clearing warm-up for most senators on this committee. Starting tomorrow, there'll be some serious exchange and questions of 30 minutes, and then the following day, 20 minutes for each senator to participate in this. We're looking forward to this opportunity to finally really give you a fulsome opportunity to respond to many of the things that you've heard and to answer direct questions. Members have until Thursday at 5 p.m. to submit questions for the record. We're going to reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to begin the 30-minute rounds of questions. We thank all the participants and members of our audience for keeping this dignified, respectful, and civilized, and we hope to continue that tradition tomorrow. The committee stands adjourned.
Oh, so let's see how spicy tomorrow gets. Again,
The
today
chairman of
was
the
just
Senate
basically
Judiciary
the
Committee, Dick Durbin, has
introduction to her.
officially adjourned day one of the Supreme
And
Court
boy, Dick
confirmation
really
hearing
has the
of
perfect
Judge
first
Katanji
name
Brown
for
Jackson.
him.
That is, of course, President Biden's pick to join the Supreme Court and fill the seat that will be vacated by Justice Stephen Breyer. You see folks starting to file out of the room there after a relatively short day. You heard from every senator on that Judiciary Committee delivering their opening statements. We heard from two people who know Judge Jackson from both her personal and her professional backgrounds. And then, of course, we heard from Judge Jackson herself, introducing herself and her family.
Oh, let's bounce back and let's look at a couple of these.
This is going to be about your philosophy. citizens, civic leaders, elected no further than my own grandchildren. All of them.
Didn't get much coverage. I want the
Let's see what
court
old Lindsey
to
Graham's
play
got to say.
a
I didn't get to
particular
see
role
this.
in America. One is make it more look like the country, but also make it operate in the confines of the Constitution. That didn't get a lot of coverage. So the hearings are going to be challenging for you, informative for the public, and respectful by us. I hope we can meet those criteria. It won't be a circus. We're off to a good start. Chairman Grassley
It
couldn't
won't
get
be
the
a
first word
circus.
out of his mouth before they shut down the place, so that's off to a good start. Most of us couldn't go back to our offices during Kavanaugh without getting spit on. Hope that doesn't happen to y'all. I don't think it will. As to the historic nature of your appointment, I understand. But when I get lectured about this from my Democratic colleagues, I remember Janice Rogers Brown, the African-American woman that was filibustered by the same people praising you. I remember Miguel Estrada, one of the finest people I ever met. Completely wiped out. Didn't make it through the gang of 14, whatever gang I was in. I've been in so many I can't remember. He didn't make the cut. Well-lived life just completely ruined. So if you're Hispanic or African-American conservative, it's about your philosophy.
You know,
Now
Lindsey
it's gonna
Graham
be
actually
about the
did
historic
find his
nature
balls
of the
after
pick.
John McCain died.
It's going to be about your philosophy.
Makes me wonder
Bottom
about their
line here is when
relationship.
it is about philosophy, when it's somebody of color on our side, it's about we're all racist if we ask hard questions. It's not going to fly with us. We're used to it by now, at least I am. So it's not going to matter a bit to any of us. We're going to ask you what we think you need to be asked. And Senator Hawley, you need to ask her about her record as a district court judge. You should. I hope you do. And we'll see what she says. Very fair game. Now, President Biden had a choice here, and he has every right to make it. Elections have consequences. He had many qualified African-American women to choose from. He chose you. Michelle Childs, a district court judge from South Carolina, supported by Jim Clyburn. That was in the mix. I think it came down to about 2, 3, 4 people. Don't know for sure, but that's what the press was reporting. And when it came to Judge Childs, this Arabella group, Senator Whitehouse, you talk about dark money, you may be onto something. This Arabella group is funded by
Senator
Soros and
Whitehouse
some other
loves to
liberal
talk about
billionaire.
dark money,
They got
except
so
when it
many
comes to
groups
people
in their group, I
financing
can't
his
name
ass.
them all now. But they basically said, if you pick Childs, you may have a primary opponent. The AFL-CIO said Judge Childs was a union buster. The attacks from the left against Judge Childs was really pretty vicious, to be honest with you. So you say, Judge Jackson, you
Go
don't
back
have
and
any
hit some of the
judicial
highlights I didn't
philosophy
get
per
to see
se.
earlier.
Well, somebody on the left believes you do. Or they wouldn't have spent the money they spent to have you in this chair. So we're going to find out how that statement pulls up over
I need
time.
to clean that fucking magazine out. It's got a little bit of shit
A
in it.
viewer's guide to this hearing. She will be asked about her sentencing practices as a district court judge, and she'll have a chance to explain her reasoning, and you can make up for yourself what this means, but it's good to be asked. About her legal views, I'll ask her about the law of armed conflict and her view of the law of armed conflict. The fact that you represent a Gitmo detainees is not a problem with me. Everybody deserves a lawyer. You're doing the country a great service when you defend the most unpopular people. But I do want to know about your amicus briefs after you're no longer a defense counsel weighing into the Supreme Court about how they decide law of war issues. That matters a lot to me. I think it does matter that the
I'd be
groups
interested
that
to look
came
up
to
her
your
amicus
aid at the
briefs,
expense
too.
of Judge Childs, how did that happen and why were they doing what they were doing? What is it about your nomination that the most liberal people under umbrella of Arabella
If you don't know what an
threw
amicus
in their
brief
money,
is,
their
it's
time,
what
their
they call a
support, and
friend of the
threatened
court brief,
Joe Biden if he picked
where they're
Judge
basically
Childs? I want to know
arguing
more
for
about
one
that.
side of an issue
I
or
want to
another.
know about your judicial philosophy, because people on the left, the far extreme part of the left, believed that you were the best bet. And I want to know why they reached that conclusion. Maybe there's
well, you can
no
bet she
explanation
will
you can give us,
100%
but
support
we'll talk
things like
about that.
abortion.
Now, when we say this is not
and
Kavanaugh,
will
what do we
100% go
mean?
against
It means
anything
that
as far
Democratic
as
senators are not going to
freedoms
have their
when it comes
windows
to
busted by
firearms.
groups. That's what it means. It means that no Republican senator is going to unleash on you an attack about your character when the hearing is virtually over. None of us, I hope, have been sitting on information about you as a person for weeks or months. You come into our offices and we never share it with you to allow you to give your side of the story. We wait to the very last minute when the hearing's about to be gavel concluded and say, oh, by the way, I've got this letter. And so happened that every media outlet in the country had the letter too. So the next morning there were headlines all over the country, really, accusing Judge Kavanaugh of being basically Bill Cosby. None of us are going to do that to
That
you.
was a little spicy.
And if any of us does that to you,
Well done.
all hell will break out. And it should. The media will be your biggest cheerleader. They're in your camp. They have every right to pick who they want to pick. There won't be this constant attack on you like Judge Kavanaugh and other conservative judicial appointments. There won't be any questioning of where you go to church, what kind of groups you're in church, how you decide to raise your kids, what you believe in, how you believe in God. Nobody's going to do that to you. And that's a good thing.
Why
So
can't
you're the
anybody ask a
beneficiary of a
question
lot.
that
You're the
says,
beneficiary
okay,
of
you say
Republican
you're a
nominees having
Christian,
their life turned
how the
upside
hell
down.
can you support
And it didn't
abortion,
work.
which is
So I'm hoping that
basically
we can
killing the
have a
most
hearing that's
innocent among us?
respectful, that's informative, that's challenging. And President Biden has every right to pick who he'd like to pick. That comes with winning the White House. And I've been very inclined to support the picks of people that I would not have chosen. But this is a new game
Yeah, and
for
that
the Supreme
kills me
Court.
about you, Grant.
And this
Considering
game is
you voted
particularly
for
disturbing to me,
Sotomayor
because
and
there's been
Elena
a
Kagan,
wholesale effort
knowing
of
good
the
and damn
left
well they got
to
zero
take down
respect for
a
the
nominee from
Constitution.
my state. And I don't like it very much. And if that's the way the game's going to be played, then I'll have a response, and I don't expect it to be reward that way of playing the game. Judge Childs would have gotten 60 plus votes. There have been people in my caucus that would have voted for her, even though we knew she would be a reliable liberal vote, because I and Senator Scott would have stepped up. Now we're facing a choice
would anybody in their right
sponsored
mind
by the most radical elements
who
of the
says they
Democratic
respect
Party
the
when it comes to how to
Constitution
be a
vote
judge.
for
They have the
some of
most
these
radical
justices?
view of what a judge should do, and you were their choice. And you'll be asked, do you support expanding the Supreme Court? I hope you can give us an answer, because it shouldn't be hard. Either you do or you don't. Justice Ginsburg said no. She thought if you just changed the number of the court every time somebody new came in power, it would ruin the court in the eyes of the public and make it a joke over time. I agree with that.
Well,
So I
so
hope
far
you can
the
give us an
Supreme
answer
Court's
to that
already a
question.
fucking joke. So
Because I think the court would be better off if the judges stood up for the court. If the judges told politicians, don't play this game with the court, because over time nobody
back
wins.
this up a little bit.
So congratulations. It's going to be a couple of interesting days, and we're off to a better start than we have been in the past. And the one thing I can promise you, you will not be vilified. You will not be attacked for your religious views. You will not be accused of something that you could not defend yourself against until it was too late. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Feinstein.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by
Oh, this old
congratulating you,
wrinkled bag.
Judge Jackson, on this appointment. I've reviewed the records of a number of judicial nominees during my service on this committee. This is actually the 10th set of confirmation hearings for a Supreme Court nominee that I've participated in during my time in the Senate. And looking at your record, it's clear that you have the qualifications and the experience and the
Oh God,
knowledge
if Dianne
needed to
Feinstein
serve
is
on the
praising this
Supreme
chick, you
Court.
know good and damn
And as a
well this chick
woman,
is going to
it
go
makes me
after
very
gun rights.
proud of that. As we begin these hearings, we as senators take seriously our constitutional duty to advise the president on his appointment of a new Supreme Court justice. In the current term alone, the Supreme Court is addressing cases on issues that are foundational to who we are as a country. Let me just give you 3 examples. The court is considering a woman's fundamental right to control her own body and make her own health care decisions. It is considering the legal authority of the Environmental Protection Agency to fight climate change. And it's considering whether states have the power to enact common sense gun safety protections. As a former mayor, I saw how these how these problems affect people, everyday people on everyday streets throughout my city and then subsequently the state of California. This is not your first time at this. In fact, it's your 4th time in front of this committee. The full Senate has already confirmed you on a bipartisan basis 3 times to serve as vice chair of the U.S. Sentencing Commission in 2010, as a federal district court judge in 2013, and as a federal appellate court judge in 2021. And you have done us proud.
So far,
each of the 3 times,
they want
the
the
Senate has
Sentencing
considered
Commission
your
to
record,
recommend
your
harsher
experience,
sentences
and your
for
ability. Senators
when it
on
comes
both
to
sides
firearms,
of the aisle
not
have determined
necessarily
that you
violent
have the
crimes,
qualifications
just
and the
running
temperament
afoul of the
it takes
ATF.
to uphold the values of our judicial branch. As I see it, those values are knowledge, even-handedness, impartiality, integrity, respect for the rule of law, and fundamental fairness to all.
There's no law at all
And
that
your
would
record
have prevented the Vegas
actually
shooting.
shows that you
And I still have a lot
exemplify
of
these
questions about that
values.
shooting.
The Supreme Court is not a political institution. Rather,
Oh,
the
shit.
court stands above politics and above partisanship. And we look to federal judges to be independent and unbiased.
Oh, that's an
Judge
absolute
Jackson,
fucking lie,
in
but
reviewing
okay.
your record, one thing in particular stands out to me, and that's your commitment to uphold justice under the law. This is one of the ultimate responsibilities of the Supreme Court, and your record suggests to me that you understand the weight of that responsibility. You've had several mentors early in your career who I understand were important in instilling these values in you as a young lawyer. One of those mentors were Justice Stephen Breyer, who you served as a law clerk, and to whose
again,
seat
that's
on the
not giving me
Supreme
the warm
Court
and
you
fuzzies
have
about
now
this
been
chick,
nominated. What a
because
treat
Stephen
for
Breyer is an
you to
absolute
see that
anti-gun
happen,
statist.
and I know for him as well. Justice Breyer has been a thoughtful and even-handed judge throughout his career. So you have learned from the best, and you have
Oh,
brought
Jesus
those
Christ.
lessons and that dedication to equal justice with you throughout your career in the law. You have strong credentials. You're a graduate of both Harvard University and Harvard Law School, a former Supreme Court clerk, and you have served as a federal judge for 9 years, most recently on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District Circuit. These are impressive credentials.
For the D.C. Circuit.
And they are also familiar to those of us who have who have reviewed numerous nominees to the court. But you also bring experiences that are less common, especially at the Supreme Court. The first is your service as a federal public defender earlier in your career. If you were confirmed, you would be the first ever federal public defender to sit on the court, and the first justice since Thurgood Marshall with significant experience representing low-income defendants and criminal cases. I believe this is very significant and important because as a former public defender, you understand
Yeah,
the
it'd be
power
tough to polish
of
your
our
weapon and look at
constitutional
this
rights,
chick.
including the Sixth Amendment right to counsel and the Fifth Amendment right to due process. You also understand the effect of law
What
and the
about
law enforcement
understanding
system
the
on
Second
the most
Amendment?
vulnerable. And I believe
The
your
right
8
of the
years of
people to keep and
expertise
bear arms,
as a trial
or
judge
the
on the
Fourth
DC
Amendment,
District Court is
your right
very
against
valuable.
unlawful
So,
search and seizure.
if confirmed,
Um,
you would be one of only 2 former federal district court judges serving on the court.
That whole
The
stream
other being
last night
Justice
about the domestic
Sotomayor.
spying, you know this
I
chick
believe
would
your
uphold that shit.
perspective as
What's
a
up,
former
Fire?
trial judge will serve you well on the court. You've been responsible for implementing the precedent set by higher courts. And because
Yeah,
of
right to
that,
property.
you understand the need
yeah.
for clarity in legal opinions,
You know this
for
chick will
achieving
go
consensus
absolutely
wherever
full bore
consensus
to
is
defend
possible. And
seizures.
that has been your record. It's important to have justices with a broad set of views and experiences on the Supreme Court. And I believe your
the only
background
important
and
should
your
be,
experience
can you
will
read the
only serve
Constitution and
to
apply it as
strengthen
it is
the
written?
Supreme Court.
That should be your
I
only
trust that
freaking
my colleagues on
qualification.
this committee will recognize that you are unquestionably qualified for this position. I wish you well. I look forward to learning more about you over the course of the coming days. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Feinstein. Senator Cornyn of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Jackson, let me join my colleagues in extending a warm welcome to you and your family. Congratulations on your nomination. I enjoyed sitting down with you recently and talking about your experience as both a lawyer and a judge and how that's molded your views of our judicial system. In the coming days, I hope we can have a candid conversation about your record and
You
your
know there's
judicial
not going to be
philosophy.
anything candid about
As
this
I told you
conversation
the
whatsoever.
other day, these proceedings will be thorough but civil. As a member of this committee, I've had the opportunity to provide advice and consent on 7 previous Supreme Court nominations. This is number 8. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to the way the Senate conducts these proceedings, and so have the American people. One of the best things I think comes from this process is I think this is a teachable moment that will remind all of us about the wisdom of the founders who wrote a constitution that made sure that our rights would be fixed and certain, so that these rights, whether they are the right to keep and bear arms or the right to practice one's faith, would be preserved from generation to generation. As you know, the founders established 3 separate branches of our government, a system of checks and balances, if you will. This was done for the purpose of preserving individual freedom and avoiding tyranny, and ensure that our government was ultimately accountable to the people from whom all political power derives. Article 3, as you know, vests the Supreme Court and inferior courts with the judicial power. But the framers were very
Yeah,
clear.
they pretty much both suck when it comes
The courts
to
are not vested
actually
with
standing up for our rights.
policy-making authority. According to our Constitution, courts hear cases and controversies and decide them. Nothing more, nothing less.
I wish
an important
that's all our
distinction to
Supreme
remember
Court
in the
did.
days that lie ahead.
If that's all
Indeed,
they
the
did, the
framers
1934
envisioned that the
NFA would have
courts
been
would
shot
be-
the fuck
would
down
have a
before the ink
modest-
dried.
but very important role in our 3 branches of government. You'll recall Federalist 78, where Alexander Hamilton said the courts would have no influence over either the sword or the purse, and that it may truly be said to have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Part of that judgment requires a judge to go where the law commands, whether or not you personally approve or not. And it starts with deciding cases as presented and not cherry picking the facts or the law and starting with a decision and then justifying it by the way, by cherry picked facts and provisions of the law. While the framers provided that the president would nominate judges, the framers also set up a framework
Joe
that allowed
Biden's damn near
judges,
been in
once you are
office long enough
confirmed,
to vote on the
to
MFA.
exercise independent judgment free from
He definitely
elections
voted for the
and
68
politics. And so these Supreme
GCA
Court
and then
confirmation
what
hearings
was
are
it,
really the only
96,
chance we have
or 86
as representatives of the people to vet somebody
gun
who
control
will
act.
serve the remainder of their life. Unfortunately, there are some driven by their ideology that want the Supreme Court to do more than what I've just described. These are some of the same people who tried to bully Justice Breyer into an early retirement. These activists demand that the court make policy and deliver results they can't achieve through the deliberation, compromise, and rough and tumble of legislative politics. And when the court does not deliver the results they want, they attack its institutional integrity and legitimacy.
You remember the stream I did on
In recent years,
the
these radical views have made their way into the mainstream.
straw purchase case where
On the
the guy
campaign trail,
bought a gun,
President
had it
Biden refused to
transferred to his
disavow
dad
court
or his
packing.
uncle through an FFL.
2
and
years
they
ago, the
tried
Democratic
to put the
leader
guy
of
in
the Senate
prison
went
for
to
a
the
straw
Supreme
purchase.
Court steps
Breyer
and
was all
threatened
about
two sitting
that.
Supreme Court
Even though the
justices
dude
by
had a
name
background check run
that they
when he
did
bought
not
the
rule
firearm,
in a
and he
particular
transferred
way.
the gun to his uncle through an FFL.
Dark money groups like Demand Justice have paid millions
Breyer
of dollars
was
to
more than willing to put a
promote
guy in
court
prison
packing and
over
sow
that
public
shit.
distrust in the legitimacy
And
of the
she is
Supreme
in
Court.
Breyer's
Justice
vein.
Breyer, as you know, recently warned of the crippling
Again,
effect
not getting
this
the warm and fuzzies.
politicalization of the court and its decision-making can have. He said, without the public's trust, the court would no longer be able to act as a check on the other branches of government and a guarantor of the rule of law, threatening the foundations of our constitutional system. Judge, I know
Crow,
you
you'd
know
have to
that
go
the
back and
courts are
look at
not
that
designed
stream.
to deliver particular policy outcomes
It's
or to
freaking
invent
crazy.
new rights out of whole
The guy
cloth.
ended up, I think, getting probation.
That's why it's imperative that we
of course, he
explore
lost his firearms
your judicial
rights.
philosophy during
But
this
yeah,
hearing.
they tried putting him in prison for
I will say I
decades.
was a bit
Even
troubled
though
when you have
he
not
had a
so far
background check
provided
run when
us
he
with
bought the
much
gun.
clarity
He
on that
transferred the
matter.
gun to his uncle through
Someone
an
as
FFL.
accomplished as you are, who spent years
They merely
engaging
said
and
he
thinking
lied on
about
his
our
4473
Constitution and
because
laws,
he
has
wasn't
surely
the
formed a
purchaser,
judicial philosophy. This is not your first
and
rodeo.
tried sticking his ass in prison.
You've had an
And
impressive
Breyer
career,
was,
Judge.
the biggest thing
as
Breyer
a
was
Supreme
worried
Court
about was
clerk,
being able
appellate
to track
advocate,
who
and
has
trial court
firearms.
judge. I like the fact that you've had such
Yeah,
broad
that whole
experience
thing
in
is
our
just
judicial
insane.
and legal system. But there are still unanswered questions that remain.
It was the Abramski case.
I'm a
That's
bit
what
troubled
it
by
was.
some of the positions you've taken and arguments that you've made, representing people who have committed terrorist acts against the United States and other dangerous criminals. As someone who has deep respect for the adversarial system of justice, I understand the importance of zealous advocacy. But it appears that sometimes this zealous advocacy has gone beyond the pale. And in some instances, it appears that your advocacy has bled over into your decision-making process as a judge. You've had some cases reversed, like all judges do, but some of them were particularly high profile when you ruled against a Republican administration. I'm eager to understand why in some instances you found that you could not decide a particular issue, while in other instances you enjoined a Republican administration from implementing its policies. I'm also interested, as others have mentioned, in your opinion, why pro-abortion, dark money groups like Demand Justice, and anti-religious liberty groups are pouring millions of dollars into a public campaign in support of your nomination. Judge Jackson, these are some of the questions and concerns I have. I assure you that you will have every opportunity to address these concerns as the committee evaluates your ability to fairly and impartially deliver justice should you be confirmed. So I welcome your testimony at these hearings, and I look forward to our give and take. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Senator Cornyn, Senator Whitehouse, Rhode
Senator
Island.
fucking Whitehouse.
Thank you very
This
much,
dude's a
Chairman. Welcome,
douchebag
Judge
of the highest
Jackson. I
order.
could not be more delighted to have you here. This is a refreshing moment. We are holding a hearing for an accomplished, experienced, highly qualified nominee to the Supreme Court who came to us not through a dark money funded turnstile, but through a fair
Yeah, fucking right.
and honest selection process. Judge Jackson has unparalleled breadth of experience, both on
This
and
chick
off
was
the
chosen
bench.
because she's
She has
black.
already
She
been
has a
confirmed by the Senate
vagina,
3 times.
and she is going to be
She serves on what is
completely
often called the second
madly
highest
far
court
left.
in the land. The DC Circuit handles some of the most difficult and consequential cases in the nation, often taking up questions that later come before the Supreme Court. Judge Jackson, that will enable you to jump right in once confirmed.
And the D.C. court gets overturned
Before the DC
damn near as
Circuit,
much as the
Judge
Ninth
Jackson was a trial
Circuit.
judge in the district court in the District of Columbia, ruling on hundreds of cases and presiding over trials, including many jury trials. Judge Jackson, you have presided over virtually every kind of case a federal trial judge can hear across criminal and civil law. You have more experience actually trying cases in your courtroom than any other member of the court. As a member of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, you helped establish the policies and practices for federal courts
Oh, I'll be back.
when deciding criminal punishments. With commissioners from both parties, you helped implement our bipartisan Fair Sentencing Act. Complicated and consequential work, and we thank you. It matters to me, Mr. Chairman, that Judge Jackson was also a civil litigator and public defender. She wasn't groomed in partisan petri dishes. She learned practical courtroom experience in both civil and criminal law, how the judicial system works and how it serves or doesn't serve different litigants. And I must say that in Rhode Island, we love that before you clerked for Justice Stephen Breyer, you clerked for Rhode Islander Bruce Selya on the First Circuit. Judge Selya was nominated by Ronald Reagan. He is well regarded by bench and bar, and he thinks the world of Judge Jackson. She is absolutely everything you would want in a Supreme Court justice, he told the Boston Globe in February. She has all the tickets in terms of her intelligence, her education, her work experience, and her demonstrated judicial temperament. He actually said that waiting for the Supreme Court selection process to take place made him feel like a father waiting to hear his daughter's college admissions results. We very much appreciate that Rhode Island touch to this nomination. Judge Jackson is steadfastly committed to the Constitution and the rule of law, and the record reflects the type of even-handedness and independence that will make her such a good Supreme Court justice. Her guiding principle, she has said, is to consistently apply the same level of analytical rigor to a case, no matter who or what is involved in the legal action. She says this means you can, quoting again, be consistent in the way you are analyzing the issues. And you can set aside any thoughts about who is making the arguments.
She's going to be consistently
and what
against
advantages any side might take
firearms
away
rights
from your
and
opinions.
freedom.
If you have fidelity to the rule of law that is grounded in looking at only those inputs, she said, then I think you can rule without fear or favor. Mr. Chairman, Judge Jackson will be an exemplary justice, both because of the qualities that she possesses.
Of course, we
and
all know all
because
these Democrats
she
are
did not
completely
undergo
anti-gun.
a secret
Sheldon
pre-selection
Whitehouse
process
being
to
one
get
who
here.
is ravingly
She is before us on the basis of her
anti-gun.
own merit. not on the
this
recommendation of a
douchebag
secretive
praising
right-wing
this
donor
chick's,
operation,
judicial
hiding behind
record
anonymous
is
multi-million dollar
absolutely
donations,
terrifying.
and aimed at capturing the United States Supreme Court as if it were some 19th century railroad commission. The unpleasant fact is that the present court is the court that dark money built. Anonymous donations funded the Federalist Society while it housed the selection turnstile run by the dark money donors. Anonymous money funded the dark money group down the same hallway as the Federalist Society that ran the dark money political campaigns for the
You know how
selected
people will
justices.
accuse you of things that
And
they're
because of all that
actually
secrecy,
doing.
Americans are denied
Sheldon
any
Whitehouse
real
is an
understanding of the
absolute
overlap
poster child
of all
for
that
shit
dark
like that.
money with the political dark money funding the Republican Party, which could well explain the wreckage of Senate norms, rules, and procedures that accompanied the confirmation process of recent nominees. Judge Jackson's nomination and the process by which she was selected stand in sharp contrast. President Biden undertook a thorough and independent review of her record, and she will proceed through a thorough and fair process here in the Senate. We will abide by the new precedents
there's
set by
like
Republicans in recent
some
years.
liquid
We will
dripping
not
down my
be
neck right
fabricating new
now.
ones.
And there's a dude
We've
standing
already
back there
seen dark money
pissing, but
groups
he's telling me it's raining.
use dark money to run ads
I'm pretty sure it
charging
ain't
that
raining.
dark money swayed this
It's
selection.
actually a pretty damn
We are
sunny
hearing
day
that again
outside.
today. Ironic, when hundreds of millions of dollars in right-wing dark money built the current court majority and still signals its wishes through flotillas of dark money front groups posing as amici curiae. I welcome the debate on these points, and I look forward to hearing more from the excellent nominee before us. Judge Selya counted the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg an old friend. I see some of the same qualities in Katanji that I saw in Ruth, he said.
Yeah, well,
Humility,
they had to
the
review a
ability
couple
to
things.
inspire others in a quiet way,
black,
not at the top of
female,
her voice.
And
Some people,
completely
he said,
to the
have the
radical
capacity
left.
to inspire by
Those are her
example
qualifications.
and the force of their reason.
What's up, Ski?
Judge Jackson, I'm certain your capacity to inspire through force of reason will be on display
Okay,
here
okay.
this week.
Give me just
Thank
another
you,
minute,
Chairman
and I
Durbin,
will
for your leadership
put
of the
some toast
hearing. And
Okay.
thank you, Judge Jackson, for being with us today.
Thanks, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Lee of Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
My job.
And thank you, Judge Jackson, for joining us today. I appreciated the conversation you and I had in my office a few days ago and your willingness to engage in a lively, interesting conversation during that. We'll look forward to more of that this week. I've enjoyed also meeting your husband and your two lovely daughters. They're wonderful people. I'm grateful to you for your service to the federal judiciary and as a member of the bar. You bring to the court, as I mentioned to you last week,
Why?
a unique
even
set of experiences.
Why
If
not
you're
just
confirmed,
start it out
you
calling
will
her out on her record?
be someone who has served at all three levels of the federal judiciary. And as a result of that, you'll have a perspective that's different than that of most who have served on that court during the modern era. And I appreciate your willingness to be considered and to be here to talk to us
Again,
about
the only
our
thing that
questions.
should matter is will you apply the
I echo what
Constitution as
many
it
of my
is
colleagues have said today.
And
that
there absolutely
I
should
am
be
dedicated,
a
as I
trigger
always have
that when you
been,
have justices
making
like
sure that
Beyer
these
who are making
hearings
unconstitutional
are
rulings,
respectful.
their ass should be impeached right
engaging
away.
in the politics of personal destruction is not something we should ever aspire to. It is something that has occurred.
Brother, at least, Bull, if they
on this
put me on the
committee
Supreme
in the
Court, I
context
can
of Supreme
read
Court
and understand the
nominations.
Constitution.
I'm pleased to say that
and
it
I wouldn't
has
make any
never been
decisions that are not
under Republican leadership that such attacks have occured. And I intend to make sure
they would
that
have
this
serious
hearing
issues with the
is
Interstate
no
Commerce
exception to that.
Clause.
There are a few
and,
reasons for that.
civil
First and foremost,
asset
the most obvious is
forfeiture
that
and things
respect to
like that if I
human
was on
beings
the court.
requires it.
And definitely
Secondly,
the NFA
it's important because
would
we
not
focus
stand.
on personal attacks. That means we will be betraying our duty under the Constitution and to our constituents to make sure that we do our jobs fairly and properly. when we're focused on things that we have no business doing, like bringing forward spurious, last-minute, uncorroborated accusations of a personal nature, we neglect the importance of talking about the jurisprudential role, the philosophy that guides individual jurists, and the document that we're all sworn to uphold and protect, the Constitution of the United States. It's also important for an additional reason, a third reason. It has to do with the fact that having been nominated to this position, we know that you stand a very decent likelihood of ultimately being confirmed to this position, in
Why?
which case you'll
Because
serve as a member of the
Republicans
Supreme
aren't
Court
gonna
of the
fight
United States.
against
And I think it's important.
This chick going on to the Supreme
Even
Court.
when, especially when we disagree with decisions issued by that tribunal, we as a committee, as the Senate Judiciary Committee, not engage in speech or behavior that would undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court of the United States. You see, it's the legitimacy of the courts that gives them their potence, their power, their significance in our system of government. We all have a duty to make sure that we don't undermine that very thing that we purport to be protecting. Let me tell you some of the things that I look for when reviewing a nominee, and a few things that I intend to focus on in these hearings with you. One of them will involve any nominee's commitment to judicial self-restraint, to understanding the judicial role, what it is and what it is not. Any judicial nominee these days will acknowledge that he or she understands that the role of the judge is to interpret the law based on what it says, rather than on the basis of the judge's personal opinion. This is all very true. It raises questions as to how exactly that goes about and what steps, what tools, what rhetorical, linguistic devices the jurist in question might follow in order to do that. I'm looking for someone who is ideally going to echo something that Justice Amy Coney Barrett said in her confirmation proceedings, in which she
this chick is so far
the
from Amy
Constitution.
Coney Barrett. It ain't
This
even
document,
fucking funny.
written by wise men nearly 2.5 centuries ago, wise men who I believe were raised up by Almighty God to that very purpose. To the extent we follow that document, it's helped foster the development of the greatest civilization the world has ever known. But she likened this and our commitment to it as a little like what Odysseus told his crew. She said the Constitution is like how Odysseus ties himself to the mast to resist the song of the sirens. She then goes on to explain that he told the crew, do not untie me, no matter how much I beg or plead, don't untie me from the mast. He wanted to avoid the tempting call of the sirens. The tempting call of the sirens is inherent. It's in government itself. It's understandable. And that's why we tie ourselves to it. Critical to that is the federal judiciary, the ultimate backstop, the backstop that's there to resolve disputes. Now, the Constitution isn't just something for the courts. It's not something that's owned exclusively and independently by the federal judiciary or the Supreme Court itself. But it does play an important role because the court's there to resolve disputes that arise within the court's jurisdiction as to the meaning of a particular provision of federal law, whether in the Constitution itself or as enacted into law by Congress. So we need a jurist who's willing to respect that role and demonstrate judicial humility. What I mean by that is an ability to acknowledge that there are a lot of things not within the proper courts that entail policy. The job of the court of the judiciary is never to exert will or force. It is only judgment. It's discerning what the law says. A nominee also, I believe, needs to show a steadfast commitment to the principle of separation of powers. There are a couple of forms of separation of powers required by the Constitution along two axes. One operates along the vertical axis that we call federalism. It says most of the power of government within the United States, most powers that government might exercise are to be exercised at the state and local level.
Yeah, that went away a
Power
long
that's
damn time
federal
ago.
is the exception, not the norm in our constitutional system of government. The other form of separation of powers operates along the horizontal axis. It's one that recognizes within the federal government, which is limited, we're going to have one branch, our branch, Congress, that makes the laws. Another branch headed by the president, the executive branch that enforces them, and the third branch which interprets them, resolving disputes between parties coming before the court's jurisdiction. Third,
We
I think it's
haven't
important
operated
that
like that in a very long
a jurist
time.
within our system of government acknowledge the importance of interpreting the law as it was written, as it was understood by the public at the time of its enactment, if a statute or if a provision of the Constitution at the time of its ratification. This is part of how we tie ourselves to the mast, making sure that we undertake efforts to make sure that we're interpreting it based on how the public understood those words, regardless of the subjective intent of any particular lawmaker or group thereof. The public meaning at the time it became law. This is how we maintain the rule of law. This is part of how we've given force to this greatest civilization that human history has ever recorded. It's through the rule of law and tying ourselves to that mast. There are increasing
they
threats
pretty much tied us
to
to
this.
a big purple.
We've seen those
dildo.
threats arise with efforts to delegitimize the court.
Boy, what are you
And
doing?
I'm sickened every time I see or hear or experience one of those efforts to delegitimize
Come
it.
here.
We've heard some
You wanna say hi
today,
to people?
in fact, comments that I think by their very nature delegitimize the court. Another thing that can delegitimize the court
You gonna say hi to
are
people?
arguments made in favor of packing the Supreme Court. This was attempted by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1937. It did lasting damage to the court.
I
It
do
didn't
believe you
succeed
trusted
as a
the farce you
legislative
shouldn't have
matter,
trusted.
but it's arguable that it left a mark and not a pretty
I
one.
think so.
There is nothing in the
Good point,
Constitution that requires us to have 9 and only 9 justices. That is, under the Constitution, left to Congress's determination. But 9 is a number that works. It's worked now for
I'll be back.
152 years.
We
It's
have
not
to
one that we ought
solve
to
the
revisit, and it's
situation
one
here.
that
Like I
Supreme
said,
Court justices
someone
of
trusted
various
a farce they
ideologies,
shouldn't have trusted.
including your former boss, Justice Breyer, whom I really enjoyed getting to know.
Well, yeah,
when
Bull Rush, those
serving
are
as
my
a law
chickens
clerk
you're
on the
hearing in the
Supreme Court. I
background.
enjoyed our conversations with him.
I'll be back.
He, Justice Ginsburg, Justice Thomas, and so many others have been against that. We must
on, boy.
protect the court. We may not protect the court. We lose ability to protect the court if we allow arguments to take root that are focused on expanding that and turning the court into a political body. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator Lee. Senator Klobuchar of Minnesota.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin, and thank you, Ranking Member Grassley. Judge Jackson, welcome. We met recently in my office, and we have seen you in this committee before, and we are so happy to have you back. If Senator Whitehouse is pleased that you once clerked for a Rhode Island judge, we in Minnesota are equally happy that you are wearing bold purple today, winning over both Prince and Minnesota Vikings fans the world over. I'd like to welcome your husband, Patrick, and your 2 daughters and your other family members and friends. It is clear that your family, starting with your parents, who I got to meet, who are sitting there in the front row, who once worked as teachers, that your family has been a constant source of inspiration and support for you. My mom taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. So I know firsthand it's pretty great to have a parent who was also a teacher and they never stopped checking your spelling. As a lawyer who also balanced work with parenthood myself, I particularly enjoyed your story, Judge, about sitting with your dad. You had a coloring book and he was studying his law books. While these hearings are truly an opportunity, as my colleagues have pointed out, for Americans to get to know your legal acumen, we also learn about your background, your experiences, your values. And for so many of us, including people watching this hearing across the country, our values start with our family. There's something else particularly special about this hearing, of course. You've been nominated by President Biden as the first Black woman to serve on the Supreme Court. That's historic, with 115 justices having served so far in our history. You're the first Black woman, and it's long past time. In fact, this entire hearing is about opening things up. The hearing room, we've opened it up with actual guests for the first time in a while. And you're opening up the Senate and the court by virtue of your very presence. You, Judge, are opening a door that's long been shut to so many. And by virtue of your strong presence, your skills, your experience, you are showing so many little girls and little boys across the country that anything and everything is possible. We're here to carry out one of this committee's most solemn constitutional obligations, to advise and consent on President Biden's nomination to the Supreme Court. But this is also a time for us to consider the Supreme Court's place in our democracy and how it impacts people. You've been nominated to Justice Breyer's seat. You clerked for him, and I know he's been and is a wonderful mentor to you. So I'd like to start with some of his words. Justice Breyer once wrote that the Supreme Court must help maintain public acceptance of its own legitimacy. He said, it can do this best by helping ensure that the Constitution remains workable in a broad sense of the term. Specifically, it can and should interpret the Constitution in a way that works for the people of today, making it work for the people of today. Those words, his words, are highly relevant to the court. And Justice Breyer didn't just write about those values. In his 27 years on the court, he lived them. He approached cases with a pragmatic view of the law, and he understood that reference to the Constitution requires not just a respect for the past, although it does that, but also an eye toward the future. As we are here to confirm a new justice for his seat, Supreme Court decision away from losing their health insurance, or one court decision away from the ability to make their own healthcare choices, or the dreamers who could lose the only country they've ever known, or the people who waited for hours in the rain one recent election day in Wisconsin, wearing garbage bags and homemade masks in the middle of what would soon become a global pandemic, just to cast a ballot, just to exercise their constitutional right to vote. The court decides cases with life-changing consequences for people. It makes decisions that dictate health and safety standards for workers, protections for seniors, whether we can have clean air and clean water. The Supreme Court issues rulings that can determine who can make their voices heard in our democracy and how they can do it. So Judge Jackson, this week I look forward to hearing more on your views about the real world implications of the law and about how you will respect the Constitution and legal precedent, all the while striving to ensure we have a court that works for the American people. Judge, I believe you have exactly the sort of understanding of what the law means in people's lives that Americans would want in a justice. You're from a family that knows something about making it work. Both of your parents attended segregated primary schools and later became teachers. And when your dad set his sights on becoming a lawyer, your mom figured out how to support the family while he attended law school. After being a star debater in high school, you went on to graduate magna cum laude in college and went on to graduate with honors from law school. After law school, you clerked for federal judges nominated by both Democratic and Republican presidents. And of course, you had the honor of serving as a clerk to Justice Breyer. These aren't just lines on your resume. They show that you have worked to apply the law at every level of the federal system. And beyond those credentials, you have the perspectives of someone who has seen the law through the eyes of those closest to it. Your brother worked as a police officer in Baltimore. One of your uncles was a detective, and another was the chief of police of the city of Miami. You know what it means for a person to put their life on the line to defend the rule of law. It is no surprise to me that you received the letter that Senator Durbin
that was
mentioned,
a
the letter of support from the
timely
Fraternal Order of
diaper
Police.
for a hearing like
And as
this
a
because it
former
was full
federal
of shit
public
too.
defender, you also understand that for our justice system to be truly workable, it must account for those who lack the resources to defend themselves. And you would be the first justice to bring that experience to the court. Judge, I believe it is because of your experience and respect for the law that the Senate has confirmed you 3 times with bipartisan support as Vice Chair and Commissioner of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, Judge on the D.C. District Court, and
Yeah,
most
that really
recently
shows
the
you
D.C.
where
Circuit
our
Court of Appeals.
Congress is
In
at
each
when
of
they
these
have
roles,
confirmed this
you've
shit
lived up to
3
that
fucking
bipartisan
times.
support. As a commissioner, over 90% of the votes you participated in were either unanimous or voice votes. As a district court judge, you wrote nearly 600 opinions, applying the law and precedent to the facts fairly and impartially without regard to your personal views. I will note that if you are confirmed, you will join Justice Sotomayor as the only other justice on the bench with experience as a trial court judge. As
And
a
we know
circuit
how
court judge, you have
Sonia
written
Sotomayor
decisions
stands
joined
on
by
shit.
judges appointed by presidents of both parties. And let's
Oh,
not
those warm
forget
and
you have
fuzzies,
9 years of judicial
they're going
experience,
away.
more than 4 other justices currently on the court prior to their confirmations. Not that we're counting. Judge Jackson, and I expect this to come through loud and clear during these hearings, you have the experience and record of a jurist who is dedicated to the fair application of the law, committed to consensus, and determined to make sure that the court and the Constitution work for the people of today.
Notice
one last
that
point.
state work for the people
Judge,
of today.
your
In other words,
confirmation
the
hearing comes at a moment in our
Constitution,
history when the
needs to
people of
be
this country
reinterpreted.
are once again seeing, this time in Ukraine, that democracy can never be taken for granted. Eternal vigilance, it's been said, is the price of liberty.
Yeah, holding
Last
mine
week,
gives
I
me
was
warm
at the
and fuzzies
Ukrainian-Polish
too.
border with
Too bad I
refugees
can't
streaming
just
through
wave it around on
checkpoints,
stream right
leaving
now.
everything they had behind with
You
only a
guess which weapon
suitcase
that would be.
and a backpack, walking into the loving arms of their neighbors in Poland, a country with a long, hard history of having been invaded by Nazis and Russians and Prussians and Habsburgs. As our ambassador there told me, at this moment in history, the people
And
of
what
Poland are
bearing
achieving
does
the
any of that
dreams
shit
their
have
grandparents
on
could
a
never
Supreme
realize.
Court justice
They are
in
saying
the
to their
United
Ukrainian
States?
neighbors, we value freedom and respect your democracy. We value you so much that we will take you into our homes and into our hearts. We will open our doors and not shut you out. And this horrendous war against evil and the courage of the Ukrainian people is
I'll
happening
never
at the very
tell.
same time our country is opening our minds after being separated through a 2-year pandemic from our neighbors, not only around the world, but in our own country, in our own towns. This moment bestows upon us a new opportunity to see one another again and to be part of our own democracy, to respect each other's rights.
We are not a
and
democracy.
to see that we are not a nation of 300+ million silos. Instead, we are a nation that must re-embrace the simple principle that unites us as Americans, and that is that our country is so much bigger in what unites us than what divides us. That's
Guys,
the
Flying
pivotal
Rich is
moment we
going
are
live
in.
in 30
That's
minutes.
your moment. It's a time for us to consider what
Their
the
normal
courts
time.
mean
So I'm going to
to our
run till then, then I'm
democracy,
going to shut
to
down and then
recall
go
how
over
the
to watch
framers
Flying Rich.
envisioned the courts to work as a ballast in our system of government and to rededicate ourselves to the sacred protection of our rights and the upholding of our Constitution. So as we move forward with these hearings, let us be grounded in the central role of the court and the Constitution in our democracy, of what it means to our system of government that we can never take for granted, and how we must always be vigilant that it is serving the people. Judge Jackson, I'm confident you will come to the bench as a justice with a bedrock appreciation of what the Constitution and the law means to America, with the real world perspective we need. Thank you for your willingness to serve at this important time.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Cruz of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge Jackson, congratulations on your nomination. 11,107 men and women have served as members of the House of Representatives. 1,994 men and women has served as members of the United States Senate. Only 115 men and women have served as Supreme Court justices. The position to which you have been nominated is extraordinarily important. And that is why the Senate is given the responsibility for advice and consent under the Constitution. Because the job matters immensely. Supreme Court confirmations were not always controversial. In fact, Bushrod Washington, when nominated to the Supreme Court in 1798, was confirmed the very next day. So what changed? Well, what changed is starting in the 1960s and the 1970s, the Supreme Court's role in our society changed dramatically. The Supreme Court became a policy-making body rather than a merely judicial body. Just a moment ago, my colleague, Senator Klobuchar, said we should consider the Supreme Court's place in our democracy. Well, starting in the 60s and 70s, the Supreme Court decided its place in our democracy, at least too many justices, was to set aside the democratic decisions of the people and instead to mandate the policy outcomes they themselves supported. Our Democratic colleagues want the Supreme Court to be anti-democratic. Our Democratic colleagues get frustrated with the democratic process. When they can't pass gun control laws because the American people don't support them, they want unelected judges to mandate those same laws instead. Law after law after law that they can't get through the democratic process, the Democrats have decided it's much simpler to convince 5 lawyers in black robes than to try to convince 330 million Americans. That is why Supreme Court confirmation hearings have become so contentious, is because the Supreme Court has arrogated to itself a responsibility the Constitution doesn't give it, which is to make contested policy decisions and take them away from the American people. Now, what should this hearing be and what should it not be? Well, you've heard a number of members on the Republican side of the aisle quite clear on what it should not be. This will not be a political circus. This will not be the kind of character smear that sadly our Democratic colleagues have gotten very good at. And it's important to note, a couple of years ago, I was doing my weekly podcast and I was on with a noted liberal intellectual who made a comment, something to the effect of, well, both sides do this. Both sides smear Supreme Court justices. And I was forced to laugh out loud and say, look, I understand that's a pretty good talking point. It just happens not to be true. It is only one side of the aisle, the Democratic aisle, that went so into the gutter with Judge Robert Bork that they invented a new verb, to bork someone. It is only one side of the aisle that with Justice Clarence Thomas was so reprehensible that, as the president who nominated him, President George Herbert Walker Bush, wrote at the time, quote, "What's happening to Clarence Thomas is just plain horrible. All the groups that tried to beat him up on abortion or affirmative action have now come out of the woodwork. They are trying to destroy a decent man. This is an ugly process, and one can see clearly why so many good people elect to stay out of public life." As Justice Thomas observed in that hearing, what happened there was, to use his words, a high-tech lynching. And I would note the chairman who presided over that disgrace was Joe Biden. And then most of the members of this committee remember the confirmation hearing of Brett Kavanaugh, one of the lowest moments in the history of this committee, where Democrats on this committee sat on allegations, didn't refer them to the FBI, didn't ask for investigations, hid them, and then leaked them against the wishes of the complainant. And we began a circus that featured Spartacus moments, featured such nuts as Michael Avenatti, whom CNN breathlessly for some months described as a possible Democratic presidential candidate. That's before, presumably, he became a felon in recent months. Judge Jackson, I can assure you that your hearing will feature none of that disgraceful behavior. No one is going to inquire into your teenage dating habits. No one is going to ask you with mock severity, do you like beer? But that's not to say this hearing should be non-substantive and non-vigorous. In this hearing, this committee has a responsibility to focus on issues, to focus on your record, to focus on substance, to do our very best to ascertain what kind of justice you would be. And a couple of straw men. It is no longer the case that Supreme Court confirmation hearings are merely about qualifications. There are some who say, well, if the justice is qualified, the Senate should confirm. There was a time that was the case. Our Democratic colleagues have abandoned that standard long ago. Our Democratic colleagues, then Senator Joe Biden was perfectly happy to vote against John Roberts, someone who was unquestionably qualified for the court. He was perfectly happy to vote against Sam Alito, someone who was unquestionably qualified for the court. And indeed, every member of our Democratic colleagues who was here at the time participated in the first ever filibuster of a Supreme Court justice on partisan lines with Justice Neil Gorsuch. They did so for someone unquestionably qualified, but they had a political agenda, and so every one of them happily filibustered Justice Gorsuch. Likewise, it's not about race. We will see Democrats in the media suggest that any senator that is skeptical of your nomination, that questions you vigorously, or that dares to vote against you must somehow harbor racial animus. If that were the standard, I would note we are sitting on a committee where multiple members of this committee, the senior Democrats in the committee, happily filibustered Judge Janice Rogers Brown, a very qualified African-American woman nominated to the D.C. Circuit. And they did so precisely because they wanted to prevent Judge Brown from becoming Justice Brown, the first African-American woman. Joe Biden was among the Democrats filibustering the first African-American woman nominated to the D.C. Circuit. The senior Democrats on this committee also filibustered Miguel Estrada. As the staff for Senator Ted Kennedy said in writing at the time, the Democrats filibustered Miguel Estrada, quote, because he is Hispanic. They were explicitly racial. If you are Hispanic or African American and you dare depart from their political orthodoxy, they will crush you, they will attack you, they will slander you, they will filibuster you. So this is not about race. It is, however, about issues and substance. And I got to say, I agree with Chairman Durbin. Chairman Durbin quoted Paul Simon, and he said, history will judge, quote, did she restrict freedom or did she expand it? I agree with that. The reason the American people care about the Supreme Court is it is integral to protecting or taking away our constitutional rights. When it comes to free speech, this committee should inquire, will you protect the rights of Americans to speak, to say unpopular ideas, to say ideas that the government doesn't want you to say, that you nonetheless have a right to say? Will you protect freedom or restrict it? When it comes to religious liberty, will a justice vote to protect your right to live according to your faith and according to your conscience? Or will a justice vote to crush religious liberty and strip those rights away? The Second Amendment. Will a justice vote to defend your Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms, to defend your family, to defend your children? Or will a justice roll over to the Democrats that want a disarmed citizenry? The right to life. Will a justice protect the rights of the people, the rights of state legislatures to enact laws protecting innocent life, protecting unborn life, stopping abominations like partial birth abortion? Or will a justice view her job as a super legislator striking down all such rights? School choice. Will a justice protect the rights of kids to get a quality education, or will a justice legislate from the bench and shut down school choice programs across this country? And crime. We are seeing murder rates, carjacking rates, crime rates skyrocketing across the country. in significant part because political Soros-backed district attorneys, because of Democratic efforts to abolish the police. And part of the Democratic effort to abolish the police is nominating justices that consistently side with violent criminals, release violent criminals, refuse to enforce the law, and that results in jeopardizing innocent citizens. So all of those questions are fair game. Will you follow the law? What does your record indicate? Will you protect the rights of every American citizen, regardless of race, regardless of party, regardless of views? That's what the focus of this hearing should be.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Coons from Delaware.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley. Judge Jackson, congratulations on your nomination. It is a joy and a blessing to welcome you and your family and your supporters here this morning. As both Senators Klobuchar and Cruz have laid out in great and forceful detail, the decisions of the United States Supreme Court have daily impact, regular bearing on the lived experience of Americans, and that is in part why hearings for this important role are so contentious. I have been looking forward to this day since President Biden announced your nomination in February, and over the next several days, members of this committee will have the privilege of helping introduce you to the American people so that they can gain the sense of confidence that I have in your values, your skills, your competence, and the necessity of confirming you to the Supreme Court. We'll be inviting you to speak directly to the American public and share the lived experiences, the strong qualifications, the judicial temperament, and the strength of character that made you not only an historic nominee to the Supreme Court, but an outstanding one as well. I want to acknowledge up front that President Biden selected you to fill the seat on the court being vacated by Justice Breyer, a justice whom I admire, and in the work he's done as a jurist over decades has shown us a model of a Supreme Court justice. In his 42 years on the federal bench, 30 years on the Supreme Court, he's lived up to the highest ideals of American jurisprudence. He has served with wisdom, with fairness, and respect for the Constitution, the laws of our nation, and its people. He has a keen legal mind and a love of the law that are obvious to anyone who's heard him ask questions or read his decisions, and certainly to someone who clerked for him on the Supreme Court and who has had the benefit of his mentorship over many, many years. You've had broad experience in your stellar legal career that'll make you a unique contributor to the Supreme Court. You've worked as a lawyer or as a judge in just about every level of our legal system, engaging in just about every area of federal law. Your experiences as a private practice attorney with large law firms, as a federal public defender, as vice chair of the U.S. Sentencing Commission, and your near decade of service as a federal judge have given you insights into the ways that our Constitution, our statutes, our sentencing guidelines, and judicial decisions all come together to directly impact individuals, families, and our communities. You're able to perceive the full sweep of our law without losing sight of the human beings, the individuals and families impacted by it, caught up in it. And it is critically important, in my view, that we have justices on the Supreme Court with this practical and proximate view. You began your legal career with the invaluable experience of clerking for judges at the federal district court, at the circuit court, and for Justice Breyer on the Supreme Court, judges appointed by presidents of both parties. You developed your career as a legal advocate in private practice and in the federal public defender's service. As part of this work, you took on complex cases involving challenging and unsettled areas of the law. You worked pro bono on behalf of clients without regard to their political views or the political consequences of those cases. And you helped ensure bedrock constitutional guarantees in our legal system held strong, even in times of great stress and crisis. The work you did in these roles distinguished you as a talented appellate litigator with a formidable legal mind. You helped to craft policy as counsel to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, the independent agency within the judicial branch that establishes sentencing guidelines followed by all federal judges. And then years later, you served again on the commission as its vice chair. While on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, you partnered with colleagues whose perspectives on the law span the ideological spectrum and together you enacted meaningful reforms designed to reduce unjust disparities and increase fairness in sentencing. In the days ahead, I expect to discuss your Sentencing Commission experience with you in some detail. Nearly all the decisions you were a part of while serving on the commission were unanimous, and they grew out of a careful consideration of highly complex, numerous factors and involved commissioners working hard to achieve common ground. In at least one notable instance, you ended up joining two conservative commissioners to oppose an amendment because you thought the law required a different result and you followed the law. Something that often gets lost in our debates and discussions about the Supreme Court is that many, in some terms, a majority of Supreme Court decisions are unanimous or decided by very broad majorities. These decisions are every bit as critical to the rule of law and the functioning and legitimacy of the court as the handful that are very contentious and widely discussed publicly. Your service on the Sentencing Commission and your time on the Circuit Court have prepared you to be a positive force for consensus among the justices in this challenging chapter in American history. I also think we will have some extended discussions this week about your record of service on the federal bench. You were confirmed to the Federal District Court for the District of Columbia in 2013 and have written more than 500 published opinions. You were confirmed to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals last year. And in your near decade as a judge, you've authored opinions in cases spanning a myriad of complicated issues, from administrative law to civil rights, from criminal and environmental matters, labor and employment law, national security and sovereign immunity, immigration law, and many more. Your rich, complex, and deep decisional record gives us the best possible evidence of what kind of justice you will be. And I've concluded you are judicious and impartial, great qualities for a justice. In every case, you methodically consider the parties' arguments, the relevant facts, and the law, including, of course, the foundation of the Constitution, the text of applicable statutes, and the precedents that apply. And ultimately, from what I've seen, you come to a decision based on that methodology, not on any particular policy preferences or activism. This committee has also received a striking outpouring of support for your nomination from a very broad range of sources. I'm certain we'll be hearing about some of the more enthusiastic statements in detail in the coming days. But in several of the letters I've had a chance to review personally, I've been struck. These were letters from lawyers that held appointed positions in Republican administrations, letters from prominent law enforcement organizations, federal judges appointed by Republican presidents. They praise your qualifications, your character, your experience, and your commitment to even-handed and impartial judging and the rule of law. This is the fourth Supreme Court nomination process in which I'm participating as a senator, and I know our role in confirming a justice to the highest court is among the most solemn obligations we have as senators. As we begin this week's hearings, I remain hopeful that we can come together as a committee and engage in respectful, good faith, bipartisan consideration of your nomination. I look forward to your testimony this week. I'm excited so many of my colleagues have had a chance to get to know you a bit, to meet with you, to talk with you one-on-one and get a sense of your character, your experiences, and your background. And then we'll have the opportunity to question you to bring that out in more detail. I have every expectation that at the end of this week's hearings, it'll be clear to all that you are impeccably qualified in the law. And I think it'll be plain to any American watching. You have a demonstrated record of excellence as a jurist. You will decide cases as a justice on the basis of the facts and the law, and that you will be faithful to the Constitution. It's also my hope folks will get a chance to meet the family.
You guys listening to this absolute
It
horse
was
shit.
delightful to have a few moments to get to talk with your parents and your brother before we began today, and to reflect on how having parents, graduates of HBCUs, public school teachers, who then went on to great careers of accomplishment, Johnny Brown, Esquire, and Dr. Ellery Brown, set a great standard. But frankly, to me, one of the most memorable sentences before this was in talking to your brother, Katanji, who said, "Oh, I'm not surprised to be here at all. This was the sort of thing for which my sister was destined from the very start.
Yeah, she's destined to
perhaps.
absolutely make a joke
But
out of
today
the
you're
Supreme Court.
beginning a process of walking
hooray
through
for
this
us.
door because of courage, humility, determination, and a commitment to excellence. Just as another person in American history, Ruby Bridges, walked through a critical door in our history with her chin held high, her back held straight, and a fierce determination to make a difference. So you too, today, begin the process of walking through this next open door with the sort of sparkling wit, brilliant mind, and commitment to excellence that will make its mark in American history. I look forward to your opening and to this week. Thank you, Your Honor.
Jesus, dude, just have
Thank you,
her bend
Senator Coons.
over
Senator
and
Sass
kiss
of
her
Nebraska.
ass on.
Thank you, Chairman. And
Get it over
Chris
with.
is tough to follow. That was
And is that
a
chick got
good
some
flourish
crazy
at the
fucking
end.
eyes behind
Judge,
him?
congratulations on your nomination. Thanks for spending time in my office with me.
That chick looks like she
Congratulations
would
to your
boil a
daughters and your
fucking
family
bunny
more
rabbit
broadly. This
in
is a
your
big day
house.
for lots of folks in your family. Today, the Senate takes up our constitutional duty to advise the president on his nominee to the Supreme
Good
Court.
Lord, if her,
The Senate's
her and
advice
Cory
and
Booker
consent
had a
clause
damn
in our
kid,
role
Jesus
is
Christ.
especially important these days when we all, Republicans and Democrats, agree
That
that the
would be
9
crazy
justices
eyes
of the
squared.
court exercise a lot of power over policy decisions, surely much, much more power than our Constitution's framers ever anticipated. So let's talk about how we got into this mess. We're here in part because of decades and decades of recklessness by all 3 branches, not just one, but by all 3. Congress, the Article 1 branch,
Good Lord, if you
fails
woke
to
up and looked
carry
at
out our
that in the morning,
tasks
you wouldn't need coffee
responsibly
to
and
wake up.
regularly, rather than make tough policy choices. We pass incredibly vague laws and then just push the details on down Pennsylvania Avenue to unelected bureaucrats in the Article 2 branch. Then the head of the executive branch, meanwhile, whichever party he or she comes from, grabs more and more power with their pens and their phones. And finally, the Supreme Court, at the top of Article 3, tends to overstep the bounds that the Constitution sets on judicial power. The court has ignored restrictions on its authority, inserting itself into policy debates that are supposed to be entrusted exclusively to the 2 political branches. And what do we mean by that? What do we mean when we say Articles 1 and 2 are political? It means that the people are in power over Articles 1 and 2, but not in the long term over Article 3. The men and women in Article 1 and Article 2 are supposed to be answering directly to the American people. And importantly, the American people get to hire us or get to fire us every 2, 4, or 6 years.
Directly to the
But rather than
American
honor
people.
the roles given to each branch, activist judges usurp the powers given to Articles 1 and 2, which Articles 1 and 2 were complicit in this overreach. Many years of corroding our constitutional order have contributed to the polarization and the viciousness that are poisoning
Well, I
our
think Ben
politics more
Sass
broadly.
did sign on
We
to
all
the
know that our
letters to the
civic health and our
ATF
civic
asking
life
what their
is not
frickin'
healthy.
problems were.
And as was mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, it's at least good that this one got kicked off without a bunch of yokels having to be arrested and carried from the room. When Chairman Grassley tried to speak a couple years ago at one of these, it took like an hour to get started. That kind of nonsense, the theatrics that happen at these hearings, are because of a broader problem. As textualists and originalists have sought to return the court to its historic role, the Supreme Court nomination process has been increasingly punctuated with not just those theatrics, but also with lots of personal attacks. That's not what this process is supposed to be. This process is supposed to be a careful, thorough investigation of a nominee's record to help the Senate make an informed decision on a nominee's fitness for a lifetime appointment. That's why these hearings are supposed to be different, not because people act like jackwagons, but because the people before us, nominated by the president, are potentially going to serve for a lifetime. That office, as Supreme Court Justice, is incredibly important, yet it's also carefully circumscribed precisely because it's a lifetime responsibility. But we know that it's been a long time since this process has worked like that. Instead, this is often a staging ground for nasty, evidence-free personal attacks. We started down this road of character assassination in the 1980s with Judge Bork's hearings, and senators have been engaged in disgusting theatrics ever since. The most recent Supreme Court nominee was subjected to repeated accusations that were nothing more than unfiltered religious bigotry against her. The nominee before her was accused of serial rape, aided by members of this committee. If this process were conducted in good faith, Miguel and Estrada and Janice Rogers Brown might well be on the Supreme Court today, but their opponents lied and bullied rather than accepted principled minority judges. We've gotten so used to this kind of bullying that 2 years ago, the current Senate Majority Leader stood on the steps of the United States Capitol and screamed threats against 2 sitting justices of the Supreme Court that they would, quote, reap the whirlwind if they ruled in a way that didn't align with Chuck Schumer's political preferences. That's weird. We should all be able to pause and say, that's weird. That kind of behavior shouldn't happen.
Well, you think in a rational
This process
world,
is broken,
yeah,
but it's a
we don't live
product
in
of a
rational
broader
world.
brokenness in the erosion of our constitutional structure. A lot of people are willing to take a sledgehammer to the structure if it offers them a quick political win. And it's no coincidence that as more of us embrace an ends justifies the means philosophy of our jobs, which are supposed to be jobs of public trust, our politics becomes uglier, more brutal, and more pathological. Well, we have an opportunity today to do something different, and we can demonstrate that the Congress can carry out its constitutional duty responsibly without a lot of that past ugliness. Judge Jackson has served for the last 9 months on the prestigious U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit.
Oh, I wouldn't call them
And before
prestigious.
that, you spent 8 years on the D.C. District Court. She has a long record of public service and a long roster of colleagues and friends who will testify to her professionalism. The
I'll
president
tell you what,
believes that
guys,
she
I'm
should
going to
have
end
a
this one
lifetime
here.
seat on the Supreme
Rich is
Court,
going
and
live,
it's
so
the
I'm
job
going to
of this
bounce
body
over
to
and listen to
evaluate
him.
that recommendation on its merits.
And we're going to
So what
end
should we be
this
looking for?
painful
We should
bit of
start with
life
judicial
for the
philosophy.
day.
The Senate should
so
have a good sense
you guys
of the
take it easy
principles
and
that
be
will guide a
cool.
nominee's
If you're coming over to
decision-making on
Rich,
the
I
bench.
will see you guys there.
A robust and thorough judicial philosophy
Later,
can
guys.
help us understand how, when faced with difficult